Did the cries of the innocent truly pave the way for Crusader glory?
In the 11th century, the Crusades shook medieval Europe and the Middle East, a whirlwind of faith, swords, and ambition that demands exploration and debate from every angle. Spanning from the late 11th to the 13th century, this era was a chaotic blend of religious fervor, political intrigue, and unrestrained violence, where noble ideals tangled with humanity's darkest impulses. Was it a divine call to reclaim the Holy Land or a massacre driven by base instincts? As a medieval monk with a beer might say, it depends on who you ask and how much they've drunk. Subscribe to the channel to uncover the juiciest details of this epic saga. Picture 11th century Europe, a patchwork of feudal kingdoms where lords fought for scraps of land, peasants battled to survive winter, and the Catholic Church was the glue holding it together. Religion wasn't just belief, it was the lens through which the world was seen. Fear of the final judgment loomed, making a direct pass to heaven more enticing than a feast in a famine year. Jerusalem, where Jesus preached, died, and, per Christian tradition, rose again, was the spiritual heart of this universe. Since the 7th century, it had been under Muslim control. First the Umayyads, then the Abbasids, and later the Fatimids. For centuries, Muslims allowed Christian pilgrims to visit holy sites, though not always with a warm welcome. That changed when the Seljuk Turks, a warlike nomadic people from Central Asia, stormed in. The Seljuks were far from friendly neighbors. In 1071, after defeating the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Manzikert, they seized Jerusalem and much of Asia Minor. Tales of mistreated pilgrims, plundered churches, and bandit-infested roads reached Europe. Mixed with medieval exaggeration, these stories painted the Seljuks as perfect villains. In reality, not all pilgrims suffered. Many still visited the Holy Land unscathed. But in an age without social media to fact-check rumors, a chilling tale spread faster than a galloping horse. This tense atmosphere set the stage for Pope Urban II to act. In November 1095, at the Council of Clermont, Urban II delivered a speech that ignited a powder keg. With rhetoric blending religious zeal and theatrical flair, he urged Christians to liberate Jerusalem from the infidels. He promised spiritual indulgences, a full pardon of sins for those who took the cross and died in battle. In a salvation-obsessed society, this was like offering a VIP pass to paradise with an open bar. The crowd, nobles, clerics, and peasants alike, erupted in cries of Deus Vult, God wills it, a slogan that became the unofficial hymn of the Crusades. Yet not all who answered were ready for war. Subscribe to the channel and discover how this collective madness sparked one of history's greatest sagas. The First Crusade, beginning in 1096, was a mix of chaos, fervor, and sheer luck. Before the organized noble armies marched, a ragtag group known as the People's Crusade rushed ahead. Led by Peter the Hermit, a preacher with more charisma than strategy, and figures like Walter the Penniless, a name hardly inspiring confidence, this mob of peasants, artisans, and opportunists trudged toward the Holy Land with little more than faith and rusty tools. Lacking provisions, training, or a plan, they were slaughtered by the Seljuks in Asia Minor. It was like sending hikers against a professional army. Chronicles report their bodies carpeted the fields, a grim reminder that enthusiasm doesn't replace preparation. The true First Crusade, led by nobles like Godfrey of Bouillon, Bohemond of Taranto, and Raymond IV of Toulouse, was a more serious endeavor, though not without issues. These men weren't saints. Many saw the crusade as a chance to gain land, prestige, or escape debts at home. Crossing Europe and Asia Minor was no stroll. Crusaders faced starvation, disease, and constant ambushes. Upon reaching the Holy Land, the 1098 siege of Antioch was a turning point. This key fortress held out for months. The Crusaders suffered so much that some deserted, and legends claim they found sacred relics, like the Holy Lance, said to have pierced Christ's side. True or not, this relic boosted morale enough to secure the city. In 1099, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem. The siege was brutal. Defenders, a mix of Muslims and Jews, fought with everything they had, but the exhausted yet determined Crusaders breached the walls. What followed was a slaughter that even Christian chroniclers described with unsettling glee. Men, women, and children were massacred indiscriminately. Streets, per accounts, ran red with blood. Some Crusaders, in a frenzy of faith, believed they fulfilled a divine mission. Others, more cynical, looted freely. If this was God's call, it came with fine print no one read. Subscribe to the channel to explore the raw details of this conquest. Why did the Crusaders succeed in this first venture? The answer lies in the Muslim world's chaos. The Seljuks, though formidable, were fractured. The Fatimids of Egypt and Syrian local leaders eyed each other with suspicion, unable to mount a united defense. The Crusaders, driven by blind faith, personal ambition, and the promise of plunder, pressed on. For many, the crusade was an adventure, an escape from medieval monotony where the highlight was debating a neighbor's stolen chicken. After capturing Jerusalem, they established Christian kingdoms in the Middle East. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Edessa. These states were fragile, surrounded by enemies and reliant on constant reinforcements from Europe. Maintaining these kingdoms was like playing chess on a crumbling board. Muslims, led by figures like Zengi, began counterattacks. In 1144, Zengi captured Edessa, triggering the Second Crusade, 1147 to 1149.
Europe sent heavyweights, Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany.
But the Second Crusade was a disaster from the start. Poorly coordinated, riddled with mistrust among leaders, and lacking a clear goal, it ended in humiliating defeats. Christian armies were decimated in Asia Minor, and those who reached the Holy Land achieved little. They returned to Europe empty-handed and downcast, likely inspiring mocking ballads from minstrels. Then came Saladin, the Kurdish sultan who shifted the game. A military genius and master of diplomacy and propaganda, he united Egypt and Syria's Muslims, a feat his predecessors couldn't achieve. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, he crushed the Crusader army and reclaimed Jerusalem. The battle was a catastrophe for Christians. Jerusalem's king, Guy of Lusignan, was captured, and the true cross relic fell to Muslim hands. Yet Saladin showed rare mercy, allowing many Christians to leave safely, earning admiration even from foes. Christian chronicles hailed him as an honorable adversary, a rare compliment in a world where enemies were demonized. Subscribe to the channel and learn how Saladin became a legend. Jerusalem's fall sparked the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192. The most famous, thanks to its stars, Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. Frederick's journey ended tragically. He drowned in a river in Asia Minor, a reminder that even emperors aren't immune to absurd accidents. Richard, however, was a charismatic and brilliant strategist. He captured Acre after a brutal siege and defeated Saladin in battles like Arsuf. But Jerusalem remained out of reach. Ultimately, Richard and Saladin signed a treaty allowing Christian pilgrims to visit, a compromise that satisfied no one but spared further bloodshed. Richard returned to Europe a hero, though his end was less glorious, captured and forced to pay a massive ransom. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, turned history almost absurd. Indebted to Venetians who funded the expedition, the Crusaders ended up sacking Constantinople, a Christian city and capital of the Byzantine Empire. The original plan was to attack Egypt, but debts and political intrigue diverted them. The sack was so savage that even chroniclers accustomed to violence were stunned. Churches were stripped, relics stolen, and the city left in ruins. This episode revealed how the Crusades, starting with a supposed holy purpose, became a shady business where faith was a pretext for profit. Later crusades were desperate attempts to regain momentum. The Fifth Crusade, 1217 to 1221, targeted Egypt but failed after an unsuccessful attempt to take Damietta. The Sixth Crusade, 1228 to 1229, led by Emperor Frederick II, was unusual. He reclaimed Jerusalem without a fight via a treaty with Sultan Al-Kamil. But this victory was short-lived. Jerusalem soon returned to Muslim control. The Seventh Crusade, 1248 to 1254, led by Louis IX of France, was another fiasco, with Louis captured and forced to pay a ransom.
By the 13th-17th century, Crusader kingdoms crumbled.
In 1291, Acre's fall marked the end of Christian presence in the Holy Land. The Mamluks, a rising Muslim power, swept away the last Crusader outposts, closing a 2-century chapter. The Crusades' impact is a complex puzzle. They left a legacy of violence and mistrust. Massacres of Muslims, Jews, and Eastern Christians weren't models of interfaith harmony. Crusaders often saw all non-Catholics as enemies, with Muslims responding with equal ferocity when possible. Yet the Crusades also opened doors. Europeans discovered spices, silk, and scientific advances like algebra and medicine, refined by Muslims while Europe debated theology and turnips. Military orders like the Templars and Hospitallers emerged as powers, not just in war but in finance, managing loans and properties like medieval banks. Subscribe to the channel to see how these cultural exchanges shaped the world. From a modern perspective, it's easy to view the Crusades as fanatic madness. But in the 11th century, faith was as real as bread on the table. For a medieval knight, taking the cross was like answering a divine command, though many sought fame, wealth, or an escape from trouble. Religious and political leaders wielded faith as a weapon, rallying armies with salvation promises. Yet we can't ignore the human side. Crusaders weren't just fanatics. They were men and women caught in a world where religion, power, and survival intertwined. The Crusades were a clash of cultures, visions, and ambitions. A divine call for some, a diabolical massacre for others.
The truth lies buried beneath dusty chronicles and rusted swords, waiting to be unearthed.
Let's delve deeper into the details that make the Crusades so fascinating. Consider the Crusaders' daily life. Marching to the Holy Land wasn't like catching a flight. Crusader armies trekked thousands of kilometers on foot, facing hostile terrain, extreme weather, and constant ambushes. Provisions were a constant headache. They relied on the lands they passed for food, often looting villages, Christian or not. Diseases like dysentery were as deadly as enemy blades. Chronicles tell of soldiers dying of fever or hunger before seeing the Holy Land. Yet faith, or the promise of loot, kept them going. The Crusader states, once established, were a unique social experiment. Europeans, used to cold, damp castles, found themselves ruling warm, exotic lands. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, for instance, blended European feudalism with Eastern customs. Crusader nobles adopted local attire like light robes and spices but never fully integrated. Local Christians, following Eastern rites, were often scorned by European Catholics, creating internal tensions. Muslims and Jews in these realms faced unequal treatment, though some thrived as merchants or artisans. Saladin deserves his own chapter. Born in Tikrit, modern-day Iraq, he rose from humble origins to become the Muslim world's mightiest leader. His ability to unite rival factions was key to his success. Unlike many leaders of the time, Saladin paired military skill with a sense of justice, earning respect even from enemies. In Acre, he let Christians surrender without slaughter, an anomaly in an era where surrender meant death. His dealings with Richard the Lionheart during the Third Crusade exemplify medieval diplomacy at its best, two opposites finding common ground. Military orders like the Templars and Hospitallers are another gripping tale. Founded to protect pilgrims, they evolved into war and financial machines. The Templars, with their white cloaks and red crosses, were feared on battlefields and respected in courts. Their network of fortresses and loan systems made them early international banks. Yet their wealth brought trouble. In the 14th century, they were accused of heresy and disbanded, a reminder that power breeds envy. The Crusades' cultural impact is undeniable. Europeans returned with innovations. The zero from the Arab world revolutionized math. Aristotle's texts, preserved by Muslims, reached Europe, laying Renaissance foundations. Even architecture shifted, with Crusader castles blending European and Eastern elements. But the human cost was staggering. Massacres like Jerusalem's in 1099 left scars that linger. Jews suffered not just in the Holy Land but in Europe, where pogroms often accompanied Crusader zeal. Ultimately, the Crusades mirror humanity, a mix of idealism, brutality, and pragmatism. They aimed to unite a continent under a holy banner but exposed its fractures. A quest for divine glory became an excuse for plunder and conquest. Next time you think of the Crusades, picture a dusty knight, cross-stitched on his tunic, wondering if it was worth it. The answer, as always, depends on who tells the tale. Subscribe to the channel and keep unraveling the mysteries of this world-changing era.